You're on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a laptop. And on that laptop is an interview with me.
All right, well, to hop right into it, I'm going to start off with some very surface level questions. So, first off, I just want to ask, of all the voices that you do, what is your favorite voice in the Long Quiet Head that you do?
I get this question a lot, and I don't know if I've ever had a properly good answer for it, to be honest. Like, it changes. Like, it would change every different recording. Often because, like, some voices were really fun to do, but really, like, hard on my throat. So depending on how I was feeling on the day, if there was a lot of sort of the stubborn on the docket, it would either be a sort of like, oh, brilliant, I get to do a lot of, like, you know, get to do a lot of Captain Ahab shouting, or, oh dear, I'm gonna need to drink quite a lot of tea to get through that one. I think at the end of the day, the one that I'm most consistently fond of is honestly, like, the narrator is up there. Like, it, after a while, the sheer amount of it did sort of, you know, dull some of the shine, but with a little bit of distance, I'm like, no, actually, like, I really just enjoy doing that slightly fussy narrator voice. I also have a lot of fondness for the cheated, just because, like, it's what I think of as my goblin voice, because I tend to do it when I'm, like, whenever I need to voice a little shit in a TTRPG, that tends to be the voice I go for. Just to double check, swearing's fine?
You're all good.
Yeah, grand.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's my goblin, aka my little shit voice, and so that's always a lot of fun to do. And the smitten, which, believe it or not, didn't start out as a Matt Berry impression. It just sort of gravitate like
I was curious
like...
if there was any, because I've heard people talk about like a little bit of inspiration from that, and I didn't know if that was on purpose or not. Yeah,
it wasn't at first, but the thing is, I feel like there are certain voices that most British people, if they put on a certain sort of voice, it will inevitably drift towards Matt Berry. You know, he's one of those sort of foundational voices, like, for foundational types of voice, and so, like, that kind of, like, blustery sort of, that sort of smitten, slightly pompous RP, it sort of gravitated towards there, and, like, for the first sort of, for the early demos, I think I was kind of fighting it. And then when it came to do the full game, I was like, you know what, actually, it just works.
That's fair. Just to get some representation from my playthrough, dude, I love Paranoid so much. Dude, for me, it's like, there's like a massive gap, dude. Because Paranoid's just always right. I don't know, like, he's almost never wrong. He's so helpful.
Paranoid was one of those ones that, like, he's a really good voice, but he took ages. Paranoid and The Opportunist really took a long time to properly dial into. Because early Paranoid, when I was workshopping the voice, was really close to Hunted. And so, like, working to sort of pull those two apart. Also, this was back at a point where the Skeptic voice was almost entirely different. Skeptic's sort of evolution into, like, the what I think of as the grizzled cop voice was actually comparatively late. So early Skeptic was sort of, Paranoid ended up sitting in this weird position between Hunted and Skeptic at first. And it took one of the voices that took the longest for me to, like, properly dial into. For the longest time, I was just doing a whisper, and it was only once I managed to get. It was actually some of the. I think it was some of the Pristine Cut stuff that really helped me dial fully into it, because a lot of the Pristine Cut gives the Paranoid a lot more to do than Panic. Early Paranoid was just panic, just like whispery panic all the time. but a lot of the later stuff, yeah, he gets to be right a lot more, and he gets to sort of build out as more of a character, so that really helped.
That partially probably answered the next question I have, but just to get, I guess confirmation on it then. So, what was the hardest voice that you had to hone? Was it just that, you think?
Opportunist, because the Opportunist is, of all the voices, the Opportunist is the most just kind of a vibe. Like, the Opportunist is, because his whole deal is trying to inveigle and mirror and like get people on side. Exactly what he is like. He has quite a mutable characterization. He's always a little bit slimy, but not so slimy that I can do just a full-on slime ball, because that's not the Opportunist. The Opportunist is, he's got just enough mutability to him to be able to like occasionally make a point. So managing to get the Opportunist down was easily the hardest one, because it was one of those ones I used to, at the start of for a while at the start of recording sessions, Abby and Tony used to actually send me the voice files from the summer, like a handful of voice files from the voice I was doing from previous recording sessions, so I could have a listen and like dial back in, especially if there'd been a little bit like a few weeks between a session. Excuse me. But the Opportunist, I would listen to those recordings and I'd be like, I've got nothing. That's just me talking.
Well, I definitely think eventually you nailed it. I think you did a great job making
Thank you.
him
I
up,
really
yeah.
appreciate that. And yeah, like by the end I was pretty confident with it, but it was easily the longest route to it.
So less, narrator voices in your head focused, but what is your favorite princess?
Oh, my favorite princess. There are some real good ones. I think at the end of the day, it's hard to beat the Razor. Like, I mean, a woman made of knives. Like it's up there. I mean, the Furies always like the whole like the basically any of the versions the Stubborn that her and the Stubborn are like butting heads is a lot of fun. IMO. Yeah, I'm gonna, and I mean, the Nightmare's just I love a creepy nightmare.
Love that. Nightmare's my favorite, so yeah.
Nightmare's maybe like the one that is most like that is most to my tastes in a horror sense. Just like I'm just like, oh, that's some good scary shit,
How long / what was the exact process that you would put yourself through to figure out how a voice should sound? Because they gave you just like a trait to work with, I assume.
So a lot of it was it was a gradual process. Like there wasn't really a sort of formalized thing, because what you got to remember is that Slay the Princess was it was a victim of scope creep, or I mean, victim's kind of the wrong word. It like one of the rare like beneficiaries of scope creep, because what it ended up being was, I mean, is an amazing fucking game. But the initial project, as it was pitched to me, was like quite a small, self-contained thing. And the first thing we were doing was this demo that was dropping, and like I don't know if you can still get the original demo, but like a lot of the voices there were, I think some of the voices were different. Some of them were like undercooked or had like very different vibes to them. And so like that demo was kind of where we workshopped a lot of the initial voices. And a lot of it was just like taking some hours like with Tony and Abby, and like they'd send me through a list of the voices and a handful of lines for each. And then I was just like trying out different readings, and it's an interesting one because I often think of different voices for a VA role on sort of two axes, or like two things, which are like, what's the accent, and where does it sit in my face, if that makes sense. Because I can't, like, the cheated, that sort of thing. That's up here somewhere.
Like nasally, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like you even get some like the contrarian, which actually kind of feels like it lives in the side of your face. It kind of actually that's more opportunist, but it, like where am I focusing? Where am I focusing the airflow? I guess.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And then there's the accent. Now the thing with this is because there's a level of cartoony that a voice has to hit before I will sort of put on an accent. Try do a faux French or whatever. And this didn't really feel like a game where all the voices had like different accents. It wasn't like, yes, the voice of the stubborn. That's going to be a German voice. That felt very much. It kind of felt like they all had to be believably sort of fracturing from the same starting point. So accent-wise, they all had to be kind of on the line of my own actual accent, which goes from sort of like heavily RP down to sort of like more estuary Cockney, south of England sort of thing. And the thing is, like, that's a line which, there's no point on that line which feels artificial to me, because a lot of that is just code switching, like who you're talking to. So like it was trying to basically make sure that the voices were spread sufficiently on that line and around my face. Yeah.
That's a very interesting way to, like, I didn't think about it like that, from like a voice acting perspective, like where you're like talking from in your face.
I think honestly, I think a lot of it is because, like, weirdly, one of the things I did as a kid that I think has fed in to my voice acting most is I was in a boys' church choir for like 10 years as a kid, and they took it very seriously and taught like really like proper sort of breath control, and all these sort of exercises, and a lot of that was to do with like thinking about your breath, thinking about how your breath is like coming from your diaphragm, from your lungs. And so like I think that's something I've always taken into voice acting, and it's something that I think about. Like I think of voice acting as a very physical process, oddly enough. A lot of how I conceive of voices starts with how the voice feels to do physically, rather than any sort of characterological genus to it. Genesis.
So, on the just topic of you in general, like how/when did you start voice acting?
So I've always loved acting. I right from being a kid, always did like stage stuff, and that's something that I carried on into university. I discovered two things. The first of which is I'm a mediocre stage actor. Like I'm not bad, but I'm not particularly good. But and mainly it's because I struggle with the physicality of it. And the other was that I was really good at the writing side of stuff. So I started focusing more on writing. Like the first, I'd sometimes do some like voice stuff for, like, if friends were doing audio things, like they knew that I did acting stuff, and so I'd like there's if you dig deep enough on the internet, I'm sure you can find some like old floating around files from like the mid 2000s of me doing some uni stuff. But the first, but I've always performed. I just love performance. I always want to be performing, and so coming out of uni, I was part of this group called the Mechanisms, which was a sort of storytelling cabaret band with sort of folk songs and space piracy, and it was exactly the sort of pretentious thing that you do in your early 20s coming out of uni, and it was great fun. But one of the things I did as part of that was like storytelling. Like the various songs were sort of linked together with storytelling segments, like sort of old school oral tradition stuff. And so I did a lot of that, and I got very comfortable and very good at doing that sort of narration. Fast forward to putting together the Magnus Archives with Alex, who was running a Rusty Quill, a small podcast network, and I pitched him Magnus Archives as something I would be writing, because writing was still like where I was focusing my efforts, but we didn't have any money. This was before Rusty Quill. Rusty Quill. This was before Patreon, I think, existed. Certainly before Rusty Quill had a Patreon, there was no sort of income source. There was if it goes well, if people like it, maybe at some point we'll, I don't know, get donations or sell subscriptions or something like that. So there wasn't money to be like, okay, well, who shall we get to voice this? And so I was like, well, I mean, I do narration stuff, and I've, and so I started doing the voice acting, my namesake, Jonathan Sims, in the Magnus Archives, and it kind of just went from there. Tony and Abby, I'd seen Abby's art all about for ages and really loved it, and they'd apparently been listening to the Magnus Archives, and they got in touch, and we just went from there. I really enjoy Slay the Princess specifically because it feels like my first professional step into a slightly different sort of voice acting, which is not like taking a single character and like embodying them in all the sort of nuances and all this sort of thing, but much more, I guess, what I think of as like almost cartoon voice acting, not in the sense of the voices are cartoony, but you are doing a lot of different voices in a single project, which is something that I hadn't done before, but I had a great time doing.
So, of, all of the endings, as Slay the Princess is a very philosophical game, which ending / like philosophy did you find yourself aligning with the most?
I'll be honest, that's a hard question to answer, for the simple reason that I've never played Slay the Princess.
Oh really?
In the sense that I've never like downloaded it, sat down, hit start, and gone start to finish. Because I'll be honest, the idea of listening to that much of my own voice, no, thank you.
That was actually a question I was gonna have too. That's interesting.
And also, but the thing is, like, I know all the lines. I know everything that happens. I don't necessarily have a strong sense of exactly what order they go in certain ways, or where they align. Like, I feel like I know all the details of the endings. I know every line that the narrator, the sort of the narrator in the mirror, can say to you. I know the answer to every question that you could ask him. But when you're like, oh, which is your favorite ending? I'm like, oh, how many endings are there again? I'm like, I think at the end of the day, I find myself, probably because I've spent so much time like voicing him and in his head, as it were. I think that the narrator is written to be wrong in a lot of ways, but I also think that most players dismiss him out of hand as like, you know, foolish or delusional or this sort of thing. And I think a lot of that, I think a lot of players probably haven't faced, and like obviously many players will have, but I think a lot of players haven't actually faced the sort of loss at the scale and the scope that the narrator is, like the narrator, the one outside the, you know, obviously spoilers, the one outside the machine who is dead now. Like, I don't think many of them will have ever faced the actual scale of loss that they are, and the idea of being able to preserve something, of being able to keep something that you love, and like keep it safe and keep it, like, you know, I often think that when the narrator talks about like the eternal moment, I think about, you know, being warm and comfortable and like sitting on a sofa with someone you love, and like just that moment of profound and timeless peace. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, if that did last forever, that'd be lovely, actually. And you know what? Maybe that would be better than everyone dying. But so that's not really me sort of actively siding with the narrator, but I think I side with the narrator as a provocation.
Like, you see where he's coming from, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, I see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
I see where he's coming from.
So how do you feel then about, how did you feel whenever you read the Happily Ever After route, with that being a route that basically directly challenges the narrator's, like, point of view?
Yes and no. Like, it absolutely challenges the point of view of the narrator, especially as the narrator exists within that chapter. But like, the thing is, what that is presenting is like an interpretation, and one that is like, I think there is an argument to be made with the Happily Ever After okay, diving into the metaphysics of how like I understand a lot of it to work, like the princess being the force of change, the fact that she exists within that scenario means it isn't going to be that eternal moment, you know, because the thing is, what we're seeing in the Happily Ever After, from my point of view, is it is what happens when an unchanging moment, a moment that cannot change, has to change, because it is constantly sort of cycling around and getting worse and getting worse and getting worse, and like, that is a change, you know. It's saying like, oh, like if you eliminate the force of change, things will just stay the same, but also get worse. And like, the argument that like things staying the same is de facto getting worse, I can see where it's coming from, but also getting worse is a change, you know. So I think the Happily Ever After I think a lot of people read the Happily Ever After section as an answer when it's actually a bunch more questions.
I'd never thought about that like that. That is incredibly interesting.
And I really like that it is a chapter that explores the possibility of the narrator having doubts. But I also think that people interpret the fact that the narrator has doubts as a blanket refutation of everything of like the narrator's whole deal, you know?
That's a way more interesting answer to that than I thought that was gonna. That's interesting. So I went on Reddit, on the Slay the Princess Reddit, and, you know, asked, hey, what questions would you ask the narrator if you were to do an interview with them? And the question that I got asked most was, what voice would you give the Long Quiet himself if he were to speak?
A good question. I don't know. I feel like... I think there's a few... possibilities. I'm not going to settle on one definitively because, quite frankly, you know, I haven't checked with Tony and Abby. And, like, you know, and like, so, obviously... How could I land on an answer without checking with them? Because all the voices were developed like alongside them. My instincts would be either my two sort of immediate instincts would be three. First, silence. I mean, he's the Long fucking Quiet.
Yeah, that's fair.
Second would be some sort of vocal effect where I would probably be doing a combination of a bunch of different voices layered over each other and smoothed together, so it had a sort of slightly polyphonic quality. And third would probably be a sort of whisper. This is not... No, you know what? That doesn't feel right. We need to be like a sort of like sinister, susurrating whisper of some sort, you know. But ultimately, it feels like, hey, what voice would you give the Long Quiet? Feels like you kind of answered your own question.
So I don't know if you how much of the last of the interview I did with Nicole, but I asked her this, and I'll see if you have a different answer to this. What and how would you describe to me what the look looks like?
Oh, the look! Yeah. Oh, I mean, like, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's crazy.
Because the thing about the look is it needs to categorically signal to you and let you know that you've been seduced. And, you know.
It has to inform you.
Yeah.
This was something I did with Nicole in our interview that we had, and I want to do this with you as well. Can I get the official narrator voice tier list right here?
Okay, let's see. Hold on, I need to just full screen that so I can see them all. Okay, so let's start with voice of the narrator. S tier.
Of course. That's a given.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Voice of the hero, gotta be S tier. Yep. Broken, cheated, cold, S tiers along the line there.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Voice of the hunted, voice of the opportunist. In fact, I'm going to say S tiers to all of them, and then pop contrarian in a D. Just because I think he'd be angry if it was any other way.
You know, that's fair. Okay. So everything but contrarian.
I love all my children. Love all my children. But the contrarian will be pissed off, I think. Actually, wait, no, drop opportunist down to an A, because that would piss him right the fuck off.
That's... Dude, oh wait. So, that means, everyone at home, that this is the only objectively correct, tier list, because, that's
you
how
need
this
to
works.
cross-reference it with Tony and Abby, obviously, but I'm pretty confident they'll back me up.
Well, with that's honestly, you did such a good job answering questions. You answered a couple of mine before I even had to ask them. So, with that, I mean, do you have anything that you'd like to promote? Any other projects that you're working on? Someplace that people can find you?
Let's see. My two big projects. Three big projects at the moment. Obviously, Magnus Protocol. It's the follow-up series to the Magnus Archives. New reality, new characters, new horrors, same cool spookiness. That's not a good ad, but it is a good show. So
You got me hooked personally.
Second is the tabletop role-playing game company I run with my partner Sasha. That is MacGuffin & Co. or MacGuffin & Company. We do sort of like if you really like TTRPGs and you're like D&D's all right, but I'd like something interesting. Give us a look. Because we do we've recently released a 2-player fantasy adventure game called Pit Crawler, which is fantastic, to be frank. It's really fucking good. Give it a look. And finally, I have 2 horror novels out, and a third that is currently going through editing. The ones currently out are 13 Stories, Storeys, and Family Business. So check those out because they are also real good, real spooky. And hopefully my next one, Burnout, should be coming out late this year or early next year. So keep an eye out for that.
Whenever I put out the Reddit thing asking questions, a lot of people just wanted me to say, thank you for doing the game because you brought so much life to it.
That's all right, mate. I was paid.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It's all like I'm never quite. I think I've gotten to the point where I can accept the compliment. Like fundamentally, I'm too British for this low key fame shit. But I've gotten to the point where if people are like, "Oh, I thought you were really good in X or Y," I can be like, "Yeah, no, thank you. That means a lot." And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I was really good in it. But when people thank you for it, that's weird to me because I do. My instinct is always to be like, you're welcome, I guess. But it was a job I really enjoyed doing, but ultimately because this is a career that I love and I really care about doing a good job, but also it wasn't a favor. So that's just a weird thing that I guess I'll just need to get used to it. I mean, I don't know. I see a lot a lot of North American folks seem to take to it quite naturally and just sort of walk through and they're shaking hands and be like, yeah, no, well, yeah, that's it's all for you, the fans. And I'm like, okay, thanks.
With that, everyone, it's been an honor, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you very much as well.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you haven't already, you should totally subscribe, as it helps the channel out immensely, and it helps me have the ability to interview more people. But yeah, that's about it. It's been an honor, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.